On Colorado's western slope, water is everything. That's why the Colorado River District is fighting to ensure our water security for current and future generations on the western slope.
The water is what matters to all of us and what we all need. For irrigation diversion projects associated with agriculture, we need cool, clean water. Trout fishermen downstream needs cool, clean water. The river is what binds us all.
The River District's doing a great job changing the framework to be one of collaboration. People that like to paddle on rivers also like to eat Palisade peaches and live here.
Without the River District, the West Slope would be a very different place. We'd have less water in our rivers, we'd have less agriculture, less of an economic engine that is recreation.
This is your water. These are your rivers. And this is your Colorado River District. Learn more at coloradoriverdistrict.org.
All right, welcome everybody to our newest iteration of our ongoing Water with Your Lunch webinar series at the Colorado River District. My name is Zane Kessler. I am the Director of Government Relations at the district and have the pleasure of overseeing our state and federal policy efforts and our communications and interactions with our local and county elected officials throughout the district. Thank you all for being here. Wanted to jump to the next slide and we'll get started with a little bit of introduction and housekeeping before we dive into our panelists and Q&A. The first thing I would note is we're going to do Q&A a little bit differently than we've done it at past Water with Your Lunch webinars. We're going to have Senator Kerry Donovan and Representative Dylan Roberts on in a few minutes to talk about some key legislation and West Slope water priorities that are being discussed down at the state capitol. We'll have a brief Q&A with them after their conversation. And then we'll dive into another panel with Senator Bob Rankin and former Representative Gayle Berry for more of a deep dive into conversations and an overview of some of the stimulus dollars that we're seeing at the state and federal levels coming to water projects and priorities on the western slope. And we'll have a Q&A with them after that as well. So please utilize your chat function if you have any questions that you want presenters to look at and answer, or if you have questions for us as River District staff, please utilize that chat function and send us any thoughts or questions you have. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so for more than 80 years, the Colorado River District has worked to protect the water interests of Western Colorado. We at the district work every day to manage, conserve, develop, and protect West Slope water on behalf of the citizens in the 15 counties that form the headwaters of the Yampa, the White, the Colorado, and the Gunnison basins. We are the largest special district of any kind in the state, from the Continental Divide to the Utah border, as you can see on the slide in front of you. The district covers approximately 29,000 square miles. That's nearly 1/3 of the state's total landmass. We were created by the General Assembly in 1937 to serve as the principal water policy and planning agency for the water resources of the Colorado River system on the western slope. Next slide, please. I think it's also important to note that here you can see an image of the entire Colorado River Basin in the American Southwest. The River District is also charged with helping to protect Colorado's statewide entitlements under the Colorado River Compact of 1922, as well as the Upper Colorado River Compact of 1948. With this charge in mind, the district works in concert with other interests across the state in conjunction with all 7 basin states and with the federal government to represent and protect, again, the western slope and Colorado's statewide interests in the Big River, as we call it. Something to note here on this slide in front of you is Western Colorado carries a pretty significant burden when it comes to the river as a whole. Roughly 60 to 65% of the river's natural flow originates within the Colorado River District's boundaries. When you add in the Southwestern Water Conservation District, our sister agency in the Four Corners area, that number increases to closer to 75% of the river's natural flow coming off of primarily snowpack on Colorado's western slope. Next slide, please. So at the district, we have a small but dedicated team that works day in and day out to advocate for West Slope water. Our legal team fights to keep West Slope water on the western slope. They serve as our region's legal watchdog when growing cities propose new diversions to the Front Range or new legal interpretations threaten historic water uses on the western slope. And they also work to protect, again, our entitlements under the Colorado River Compact. On the technical side, our engineers constantly collaborate with water users around the district, the state, and the entire basin to develop workable solutions that meet the needs of all water users within the river district. On the policy front, which is the main reason we're here today, is to talk policy and state legislative issues. Our policy team maintains a regular presence at the state capitol each and every year. In cooperation with our board of directors, they work to inform and advise state officials and legislators on water issues and policy matters that intersect with the West Slope's water interests. And then lastly, a new pillar of our work on the western slope is project funding. Something we'll hear about at the end of the presentations today. Amy Moyer, our newest addition to the River District team, will give an overview of our partnership project funding program. Many of you are aware that the West Slope residents as a whole voted decisively to approve ballot measure 7A last November. That ballot measure increased the River District's mill levy by 1/4 of a single mill to fund critical water projects throughout the region. I would add that in passing 7A, voters from all walks of life, red and blue counties, ranchers and environmentalists, chambers of commerce and river enthusiasts, all came together to protect our region's water resources. And we're very proud of that success at the district and look forward to talking with you about that program later on the agenda. Next couple of slides, please. It's well documented, and the reason I wanted to touch on this today is because I think what I'm about to discuss is tied to a lot of the legislative efforts and the stimulus dollars that we're seeing flowing to Department of Agriculture, Colorado Water Conservation Board, and to a number of forest health and watershed health and protection measures being funded by some of the stimulus dollars we're seeing at the state level currently. But it is well documented that the West Slope is in the epicenter of a region that continues to experience a significantly above average rise in temperature. Counties from, as you can see on the slide here, from Ouray to Mesa to Moffett have experienced a more than 4 degrees Fahrenheit rise in average annual temperature since 1895. That rise in temperatures reduces water supply, it increases water consumption, it dries out soils, and it, as we saw last summer, increases the frequency of catastrophic wildfires on the western slope. Next slide, please. With those challenges in mind, really to boil it all down, the River District works every day to protect West Slope water and keep your water on the western slope. We are really lucky and pleased to have a couple of a few great West Slope legislators here with us today that have worked closely with us over the years. Next slide, please. And so with that, I'll introduce Representative Dylan Roberts of House District 26. And if she's with us, Senator Kerry Donovan from Senate District 5. Dylan represents, again, House District 26, which encompasses Eagle and Routt counties. He's a former chair of the House Ag Committee last session, and this year is chairing the House Business and Labor Committee. He's been a close collaborator with us on a number of West Slope water priorities, and we're pleased to have him with us. Can't see if Kerry is with us. There she is. Senator Donovan's here as well. Senator Donovan represents a much bigger swath of the River District territory. If I can get it all right, I think it's Eagle, Pitkin, Gunnison, Delta counties. Am I missing one, Senator? You're on.
Well, I lost track, but there's 7 of them. So we dropped a few. Chaffee Lake.
Chaffee and Lake, not in the River District, but
no, you're right. You're right.
But thanks for being here with us, Senator. I think from here, I'll turn it over to the two of you and ask you to provide some introductory comments on what's going on at the legislature. And then from there, we can dive into some Q&A and some more topical discussion.
Dylan, you first.
All right. Thanks, Zane, and thanks everybody for tuning in and taking some of your day to be with us. And it's great to be with you all in the River District. Thanks for the invite. So yeah, Zane said, if we haven't met, I represent House District 26, which is Eagle County and Routt County. I grew up in Routt County in Steamboat, and can't imagine my childhood without the Yampa and the Elk River that I spent a lot of time on. And then I live in Eagle County now in Avon. As Zane noted, I'm a member of the House Agriculture, Livestock, and Water Committee, and so I've been a member of that committee ever since I started here at the legislature. So I've been really privileged to work with the River District on a lot of different pieces of legislation that you have been such great partners on in making sure that we get that legislation in the right place, and we've done some really great things. So big thanks to the River District for that. Bills about improving agriculture and recreational water rights, and making sure that our drinking water stays clean, lots of different things. And I really do love working on water policy with you. Also wanted to call out, Zane talked about it earlier, but thank you for your work on getting 7A passed, and very glad that happened for you all, and I was glad to support that. It's hard to get tax measures passed in Colorado, as you know, and to see that one passed with such broad bipartisan support from Mesa County to Eagle County, all the way down from Routt to Montrose, people, really came together on that ballot issue. So great job on that. As far as what's going on here this year at the state legislature, I'm glad to see that Senator Rankin is going to update you soon. Senator Rankin is, of course, on the Joint Budget Committee, and he will be able to highlight some of the work that we're doing here at the Capitol to fund the Colorado Water Plan and a lot of other water-related efforts as part of our stimulus package that we're doing here at the state level. Thankfully, the budget outlook is much better than we thought it was going to be coming out of this pandemic. And so there is an opportunity to invest invest significant dollars into many parts of our state's infrastructure. And that, of course, includes our water infrastructure. So there's going to be funding this year for the water plan, for drought resiliency, for forest health, and for a lot of other things that impact you at the River District and the Western Slope as a whole. We're also taking a lot of action, whether it's bills or appropriations regarding wildfire, and both watershed restoration, forest health, and wildfire mitigation and response. Unfortunately, we're probably heading into a tough fire season again. And, I think the state's doing everything it possibly can to make sure our communities are prepared for that season. It's going to continue to be a challenge here. We're us Western Slope legislators. We realize that water is one of those issues that's nonpartisan, and it doesn't really matter what party you're in. It might matter what part of the state you come from. So we work really hard to work together, whether it's, regardless of parties. So Kerry and I work with Bob Rankin and other Western Slope legislators to get these types of bills passed, because we know this will continue to be a challenge for the Western Slope. And we want to make sure you all have the resources you need to to do the great work that you do. So I'll just wrap up really quickly and say, we all know Western Colorado's rivers and streams face a lot of serious challenges, but I'm optimistic this year that we're going to continue to come together to face these challenges, to appropriately fund them, to find creative solutions to some of the challenges we face. And I want to thank you all for your partnership in that. And I look forward to the Q&A so that we can talk a little bit more about what's going on here at the Capitol.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thanks, Zane. It's so great. Thanks, Rep. Roberts, for making time for this. I know that you guys just started the budget of the House, so I'm sure you're busy and will need to get back to your budget duties. But always, Dylan's always been a great partner in the House on all the things that we work on for the Western Slope. So it's always great to share the screen with him, but really thanks for having us and making time to pay attention about what's going on at the Capitol. I think it's really important that, the Western Slope, but particularly those that have interest in the Colorado River, pay close attention to what happens on a week-to-week basis down at the Capitol. And you really have a great team doing that. I think many of you have visited the Capitol, and you probably know this, but if you haven't, there's a plaque that says, here's a land where life is written in water, right? I mean, from the very beginning of Colorado's statehood and the building of this Capitol, we have acknowledged the importance of what water means to Colorado. And of course it is, because if you live in an arid state and you want to do anything, you better figure out how to have water to do it. So for more than a century, right, we've relied on water to fuel our growth and our prosperity. And much of the story of this state is connected to the water that flows in it. At first, that was the silver and gold that we found in the water, then of a robust agriculture industry to now recreation. We still find ourselves attracted to the riparian areas of our state, and they still, particularly on the Western Slope, are the souls of our towns. I grew up on the Gore, right? There's not too many childhood memories that I have that are separated from the Gore Creek. But drought, climate change, population growth, and certainly speculation are all threats to these heartbeats of our communities and towns. And I don't think it's no longer an option that we take for granted what has up to this point kind of been guaranteed in a lot of ways. That our streams and rivers would flow, and that when we turned on the tap, we would have plenty of water to go around. What we're seeing in the greater Colorado River Basin is something that should make us all sit up straight and respond to. But I don't think I need to preach to the choir on this call, right? But I think it is all our jobs to make sure that folks that live and breathe this on a daily basis are figuring out how to share that story with people who don't live and breathe it, because it will be an issue that will need more than just the folks who, frankly, the folks who know what riparian means to work on these issues. But I think there's also reason to be hopeful. And now my 7 years down at the Capitol, time and time again, session after session, water, as Rep. Roberts mentioned, is one of the least partisan issues that we work on. It is something that can bring people from across the aisle and across the state to acknowledge, a problem that we all need to gather together. But getting folks to the table at the Capitol might be the easier part of this equation, because I think what the next thing we need to do is making sure that we're getting people around kitchen tables and people around coffee shop tables and people around brewery tables to also understand the future conversations that Colorado needs to have around water. And none of those conversations will be easy. We all need to take time to educate whatever our constituency is. If that's your book club, or if that's your children's, the parents of your children's friends, we all have a different constituency that we can continue to try to educate about the Colorado River and its impact, not only on our state, but on the nation. So would love to jump to questions and see what we can answer. It is an interesting session in that we do have a lot less water policy than normal kind of working its way through the system, because we didn't have water interim committee. And I think, with COVID, we made the smart decision to make sure that we are putting the safety folks, above and being extra cautious in those early months of COVID. But it certainly did leave a gap in us being able to gather and talk about, what water policy we should be working on. But it certainly highlighted how important that water interim committee work is. So I really look forward to that coming back this summer and advancing the work that we need to do. I hope we can focus on water speculation and demand management as two topics of priority for this upcoming summer.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Representative Roberts. I've got a couple of things I wanted to just specific bills I wanted to talk to you about, and I do know that Senator Rankin is going to talk briefly about some of the stimulus bills and the water plan funding. So I don't want to steal his thunder, but Senator Donovan, your name is attached to House Bill 1260, which funds $20 million from the general fund to the state water plan. 15 million in that bill would go to the water plan implementation cash fund for projects and grants administered by CWCB, while 5 million would be transferred to the water supply reserve fund, which importantly funds all 9 of our basin roundtables throughout the state. I want to ask you specifically about basin roundtables. We see them, and I think all of us have worked with the roundtables in some capacity over the years, and recognize that they really are kind of the front lines of water plan implementation on the ground. What do you see as additional opportunities down the road to maybe steer more money to the WSRF Water Supply Reserve Fund, which funds those important roundtables?
Yeah, I think I was excited to see them included in this kind of state stimulus package, which are the stimulus bills we are currently having worked through the system. This state stimulus money is a result of the belt tightening that we did a year ago. And then, in really unknown times, we cut the budget significantly and drastically. Now, at the end of that fiscal year, when we have a better handle on what the impacts of COVID have been, we were able to see some unencumbered money to put towards priorities to make sure that we're responding to things that will need attention out of in the immediate future, but maybe things that also would struggle in a post-COVID economy getting funded. So, I would make sure that these state stimulus money bills that are coming through are putting money towards the right places. If you guys are seeing some adjustment that should happen in those numbers, I wouldn't be afraid to speak up, particularly that bill. It's starting in the House. We can do some work on it because while I think the bills are all thoughtful, I think none are above, input from on the ground folks. In terms of, the ongoing investment in the basin roundtables and the projects that they lead on, I think exactly right. We just have to continue to remind people of how important these basin roundtables are and how important they are in the success of the implementation of the water plan. Of course, we saw Colorado water plans kind of fall on their face before because they were top-down ideas. The water plan that finally made it into law in the glossy binder and what we now call the Colorado water plan, I think was largely successful because of this grassroots effort anchored across the different basins by these roundtables. People are going to forget that part of the story if we don't keep telling them that we only have this Colorado water plan because we invested in this concept of these basin roundtables. And I think too, as we start to see things like the funds from sports betting evolve, I think conversations that will become stronger and stronger each year, like how do we do climate resiliency and planning for drought? All those conversations, I believe, should have the roundtables involved in them.
I was on mute. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. I'm going to shift a bill that I think is important to the entire Western Slope and much of the state, but particularly Representative Roberts' district. House Bill 1261 extends the sales tax exemption for beetle kill wood products That bill's been introduced in the House by former Representative Arndt and Representative Catlin. For those of you that aren't in the loop yet, our longtime leader on water issues and was chair of the House Ag Committee this year, Jenny Arndt, successfully won her bid to be mayor of Fort Collins, so we'll be leaving the Ag Committee, and sadly we'll be losing a water leader on the Front Range that has worked closely with us on the Western Slope over the years. But I digress. Representative Roberts, I wanted to ask you a little bit about this bill and whether you have any interest in helping to push that through, given the importance of that sales tax exemption to a number of the forest health treatment projects in your district.
Absolutely. I think this is a great bill. And I'm very sorry to see Representative Arndt leaving the General Assembly, but she'll be a great mayor. And I will, definitely be supportive of that bill. I know she's going to leave several bills, good bills behind like that. But Representative Catlin is on it as well. So he will be able to get that passed, I'm sure. I think this is important. It's one of the many pieces of what we need to do in order to incentivize wildfire mitigation. I mean, if you incentivize people to use pine beetle wood and in many different regards and remove some of the tax that go along with that, then all that's a positive. It's a net positive towards wildfire mitigation. So obviously not the cure-all for everything, but it's a great piece in our great tool in the arsenal to incentivize wildfire mitigation. And I'm hoping we can get that quickly to the governor's desk.
Thank you, Rep. Roberts. I'm getting some texts from my team at the district that I may have inadvertently said to submit your questions via the chat function. I apologize that the chat function is disabled. If you have questions, and I see a number of them coming through, you can do that via the Q&A or question and answer function on your Zoom screen. And with that said, I'm looking at one from somebody many of us know, Luke Runyon with Colorado Public Radio, Northern Colorado Public Radio. Had a question that I was planning to ask you, Senator Donovan. You mentioned speculation as one of the meaningful threats to water on the Western Slope. Luke asks here, can you expand on how you plan to make speculation issues a priority this summer? And what have been your thoughts so far on the anti-speculation work group discussions that you, of course, led the charge on last legislative session to pass a bill to create a work group to study ways to potentially strengthen Colorado's anti-speculation laws related to water?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I get to make it an issue by just saying what I did, that it will be an issue. We will talk about it. It's our committee and we get to decide what we talk about it. So hooray. But I don't mean to be too flippant about it. I mean, I think it's something that all of us who are on, those water and term committees are hearing more and more about, that water speculation is something we need to revisit. It is one of the more complicated issues. That's why I ran that bill to ask, kind of professionals in the field to look into it and propose solutions. We will get that report back. I've been trying to keep distance from the water speculation meetings because I think it's appropriate as a lawmaker. When you ask another group to look into something, you give them the space to do that work and then respond to the recommendations and respect their space, wisdom, and the charge that they were given. So, but I've been hearing good things kind of through the grapevine that is the state capitol on what they are doing. But meantime, while we're going through this process of looking into a complicated issue, as a rancher talking to folks throughout that community, I continue to hear the stories that are the reason of why we're looking into this. The alfalfa grower that I used to buy my hay from Mac, Colorado, he got bought out through, I would say, from his perspective, some questionable practices. And so I lost my source of hay. I think we've been buying from him since before I could drive. So we've been buying hay from him for decades. And now he is no longer owner of that property. He had to move and leave town. and that land is no longer in production ag. So I have both sides of the issue, the really wonky, important, detailed policy work that's been going on, as well as the real life example of I had to fill my barn with hay from a bunch of different sources to get through the winter. And that was not a cheap price tag to try to stomach as a very small producer. So we will definitely take it up. There's a lot of interest in it, and I'm really anxious to see what solutions we can put forward to make sure that water is kept for beneficial use and that it is not put to the use of outside of the state speculators trying to make a quick buck on our impending drought situations.
Thank you. I appreciate that that insight and that feedback. We, of course, on the Western Slope are all concerned about what appears to be Wall Street's renewed interest in speculating with our most valuable natural resource. And to the extent that we've even seen water leaders from throughout the state on both sides of the Continental Divide come out and speak with one voice in opposition to speculation in response to some recent media and press write-ups on the subject. So I want to shift a little bit to agricultural drought and climate resiliency. We've seen a number of bills, a small handful of bills. House Bill 1242 is another bill that you have your name on, Senator Donovan, that creates the Agricultural Drought and Climate Resiliency Office. And one of the programs that exists at the Colorado Department of Agriculture that seems to be the recipient of a number of stimulus dollars that are going to the Department of Ag is the Acre 3 program. And Acre 3 is Advancing Colorado's Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Program. That's been the source of a lot of grant funds and the primary source of funds for micro hydro and irrigation hydroelectricity projects on the Western Slope and throughout the state. Do you have any status or updates for us, or any general comments on the Department of Ag's prioritization of Acre 3 and drought and climate resiliency with their stimulus dollars?
Yeah, so that climate resiliency, ag drought and climate resiliency office will be actually bringing a couple different programs currently in the Department of Ag and under one roof, including the Acre 3 program. This is a bill that I'm hopeful that we can get right on the first time to really make sure that we're elevating production ag and traditional ag in this conversation, and using our resources to the best ability to make sure that we're being thoughtful about those processes. In the state stimulus package, I believe we're putting $2 million into the Acre 3 program to really get that money out the door into meaningful ways to help build back stronger. So keep an eye on for that. I think a good the water community isn't always known for its ability to respond quickly and react fast. We are a slow moving community because we're very thoughtful about all the policies and thoughts that we put forward. But any of these state stimulus bills have very short periods of time with which to make sure the dollars get out the door. So be aware of that. You will see a lot of these deadlines being end of the year. At most, some of them push out 1.5 years for those grant dollars to get out of the community. So not the time to think too long and hard about projects that need the money. It's really time to step forward and raise your hand and make sure that those dollars can get to projects that you think are worthwhile. But a lot of also keep an eye on some soil health initiatives that are coming through the General Assembly right now. I have concerns currently how those are being worked on, but I'm hopeful that they can be a little bit more responsive to current groups and policies that work on soil health. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we can just support the good work of conservation districts that are out there. But that also is a part of this kind of a drought and climate resiliency concept.
Great. Thank you, Senator. We're right at the end of this Q&A section in this panel, and we'll be moving to the next one soon. But before we go, I'll give one last opportunity, maybe for final remarks from Representative Roberts.
Yeah, thanks, Zane. Great to be with you all today. I look forward to hearing from you individually. Please be in touch if you have questions about anything we talked about or anything we didn't talk about that you know of. And I'm really looking forward to this upcoming summer in this interim. We're going to get the water interim committee back. We're going to be able to take up some of the topics that unfortunately had to be put on hold because of the pandemic last year. And I'm excited to see how this stimulus package will work out and benefit our water community. And we'll certainly need to watch out and do oversight on it, as Senator Donovan noted. But we've got a lot of positive momentum on water. I know when I first got here in 2018 that that it was always a fight for water funding, and it didn't always rise to the top of the priority list. But I think when we pass this budget, and Senator Rankin will talk about this, when we pass this year's budget, I think we're going to see one of the largest investments in our water infrastructure in many, many years. So that's exciting, and look forward to your continued partnership on making sure those dollars are spent wisely. So thanks to the River District. Thanks for the invite. Great to be here.
Thank you both. We really appreciate your time, especially during such a busy time at the Capitol. And again, I'll just underscore how lucky we are on the Western Slope to have such a talented and committed group of legislators on both sides of the aisle that work with us to advance our water priorities. And as Dylan did offer, please feel free to reach out to the district as well if you have questions about policy or legislative issues. We're here for you. And with that, we'll say goodbye to Rep. Roberts and Senator Donovan. Thank you again. And
thanks, guys.
Thank you. And now I'm happy to introduce two close partners of ours at the Capitol, Senator Bob Rankin from Senate District 8, which covers a massive swath of the River District territory, everything from Summit and Grand County all the way to Rio Blanco, Moffett, and Garfield counties. Senator Rankin's going to be joined by Gayle Berry, who's a friend of the River District, has worked with us on a number of issues over the years. Gayle is a former legislator from Grand Junction and served on the Joint Budget Committee during her time at the legislature, and is a budget expert in her own right. So with that, I will, why don't I turn it over to Senator Rankin for some introductory remarks. We'd love to hear what you have to say about the state and federal stimulus dollars, what's going on at the JBC, and how do West Slope water priorities fit into the big picture?
Well, great. Thank you, Zane. I think, in fact, Gayle wanted to make some opening comments. Is that correct?
Senator, I would never upstage you, but yes, thank you. And thank you, Zane. Really appreciate the opportunity. And once a budget nerd, always a budget nerd. Appreciate the opportunity working with both Senator Donovan, Representative Roberts, and certainly Senator Rankin on the JBC. He is just such a champion for funding for many of our water issues. I see there are a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I think he probably will be answering many of those, but if not, certainly reach out to him as well later. Just to give a little bit, you all know the JBC, Joint Budget Committee, is one of the few joint committees in the legislature. And there are two members from the majority party, one from the minority party, from each house. So in times like this, when there's a Democrat majority in both chambers, you have 4 members of the Democrat Party and 2 members from the Republican Party. In other years, it was 4 members of the Republican Party and 2 Democrat, and some years it's been split evenly, 3 and 3. So the key to the Joint Budget Committee is really that they come together in a very bipartisan way to do the right things for funding. And no better at that than this year, when Senator Rankin really was instrumental in, even though he is a Republican in the quote minority party, he is the longest serving member of the Joint Budget Committee and has earned a lot of respect from both all of the legislator members, but from definitely the members on the JBC, because of, he will just interject frequently. Gee, I remember when they did this, 4 years ago, and why is this back to us now? And what did they do in the meantime? when that kind of institutional knowledge is becoming more and more rare. So he's very valuable there. But Senator Rankin, why don't we start kind of by, it's been a budget year, a budget 2 or 3 or 4 years like none has ever been seen in the state budget, with the cuts that you all had to do last year, which were painful, and then the way the economy and the forecasts and the revenues have turned around. Share with us a little bit about what that journey has been and kind of where you are, and then we'll go into some of the specific water funding, because you've really been a champion on that. So.
Thank you, Gayle. I did not write that speech, folks, but thank you for the kind words.
He didn't have to.
This is my 7th budget, 9th year in the legislature. For a lot of that time, I was the only Western Slope, person on the budget committee. So I've kind of taken pride in watching budgets for water. I wanted to sort of open by saying I really think of what we're doing in water this year in 2 buckets, if you will. One of them is restoring funds that were cut last year, and I see a couple of questions already in chat room about that. And the second is look forward to the substantial opportunity, I think, that exists to actually fund some water projects and get a head start on the water plan. Just real quickly, what's happened to us, and it really has been historic. I can't say enough about our GBC committee and our staff, truly a bipartisan effort and wonderful staff. But we between January and end of March last year, we were told we had to cut $4 billion out of the 2-year budget, 3.5 out of the year that we're currently in, July to July. And we did that. It was painful, a lot of tears. But since then, a couple of really remarkable things have happened. Over $2.5 billion, really about $2.7 billion of it sort of came back. And tax receipts for this year were that much better. In addition, our forecast looking forward is much, much better than it was. So because of those things, we've been able to do some fairly interesting things. We're recommending, and this budget will be approved hopefully early next week, looking good going through the House today. We put $1.7 billion in reserves for future years, and we restored most of the cuts from last year. And in addition, we had $800 million that we could put aside for these so-called stimulus bills. But that's just part of the picture. In addition, the ARP, the new bill signed by the federal government, sends $27 billion to Colorado. That will add up to $40 billion in federal money that has come through the CARES Act bill and this one. So of that $27 billion, $4 billion will come through state government, and we will appropriate that money. And it's fairly flexible on how we spend it. But what's also interesting is $2.28 billion will go to local government. And certainly, I believe some of that money can be directed to water projects through local partnership with state money. And then in addition, coming along after that is perhaps another bill on infrastructure spending. So there really are a lot of moving parts, and most of them are still moving to restore funding and to look at new funding. I think we have to look at the big picture, but there are 2 things that I do want to open up for questions and conversation. One is that severance taxes are drying up. So the historic dependence on, average $25, $30 million going into CWCB, I do not think we can count on going forward. And also some of that money was diverted to the roundtables as well. And I think we have to find other means of funding some of those. The other thing is there's a lot of attention on wildfire this year. And there's significant overlap with certainly some of the restoration programs that go to CWCB and partner with federal government for watershed restoration. So we can't forget that those are water projects as well as we go through this. So I think that's just really a high level overview of what we're doing. I think there is a commitment, certainly because of the attention that our terrible fire season drew to our forest health, and watershed management and our rivers. So I'm looking forward to what we're doing. I think we have an awful lot of work to do to sort out which parts of which of these bills we can apply to, watershed and to healthy rivers and to our specific projects that we have lined up. I mean, we were talking about the water plan, I think on the floor the other day, and somebody said, a plan is not a plan unless it actually has resources and funding. So I think there's a recognition that the water plan is just words until we can actually fund the projects. So we'll be working hard on all of that, and I look forward to a few questions. I see a couple.
Well, then,
I would like
Rankin,
to jump.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if I might.
Go ahead, Zane.
Yeah, go ahead, Zane.
I'd like to jump in on one particular project that you've been a champion of over the years that is particularly important to the district and to Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. The Colorado River Connectivity Channel, also known as the Windy Gap Bypass Channel, is a very important project for river health. As Andy Mueller points out in the chat or in the Q&A, not only for river health, but for the recreation economy in Grand County, as well as downstream agricultural users in Grand County and all the way down the main stem. River District recently committed our first $1 million from our new partnership funding program. And we're about, we're well on our way to finishing that project soon. The current gap is another maybe $6 or $7 million to finish it out of a $23+ million total project size. What do you see as opportunities to get that funded with some of the stimulus dollars, state or federal, and get that project finished once and for all?
I think we have several opportunities. It's certainly very high on my list, if not number one. So I'm going to be looking for those opportunities. We are putting more money in the CWC project funds in several of these bills. So we ought to be able to, that's relatively small amount of money to the 800 million that we're moving around in stimulus. So I'm not exactly sure where it fits, but I'll find a spot.
What do you think that we at the district or your constituents on the Western Slope can do to help you in that effort?
Well, as I said, there are a lot of moving parts, and I think the water community has a history of really following the projects bill, and I mean I think that's the place to put it. But we just have to get we have to get it high on the projects list, and we have to make sure there's enough money going in there. But we're doing that. I mean, 1260 moves money into that fund, and we also restored, I mean, you have to really look at some of these restorations that I think there was a question on the $30 million reduction, what that really was, and it's being restored. That was money swept into the emergency fund used for firefighting and COVID, but that money is being replaced by FEMA resources by the end of this fiscal year, by July. So we will have money in the projects fund, and we have to make sure, what you can do is make sure that it's on the top of the list, that Windy Gap's on top of the list. Good fishing downstream from that, by the way.
Senator Rankin, share with us a little bit about one of the bills that you do have. We talked about restoring monies into the state budget that unfortunately had to be swept with the economic conditions last year. And you negotiated with your colleagues. As we said, it is a 4-2 committee, and he's very respected. And he was able to negotiate to get some commitments to restore some of those cash funds that were swept. Tell everyone a little bit more about that.
Well, these things are called Tier 2 in the operational fund and DNR have been funded by severance taxes that on a percent basis on what's left over. They've been drying up anyway. So the one that funds the roundtables has had problems from several years. CWCB actually moved $10 million over there, but the way we're doing that is we restored part of that money through this bill is 220 actually. It's called reverse transfers from severance tax operational fund. So we put money back in that, and then that's being rounded out. But I think it's what it puts $5 million into the fund. So, that's kind of a short-term fix because I don't think severance taxes are going to pay for it. Severance taxes were $18 million in this year forecast, in our next forecast, and they're supposed to go back up, but I don't believe it. We need about $200 million in severance taxes to fund the programs that previous legislators have allocated to severance taxes. And, if we don't have it, then these, the programs in DNR that depended on it are the first ones to suffer. So we have to find a source for that fund going forward.
The JBC also had a lengthy discussion about wildfire mitigation efforts. You had several experts come in, Department of Public Safety came in. You ultimately funded a Firehawk, water Firehawk helicopter. I may be using the wrong terminology. That's a big issue when we talk about water. Tell us, share with everyone, that was a very good discussion you had on.
4 of those big fires were in my district, including East Troublesome and the one that severely damaged the Glenwood Springs watershed. So we've really been scrambling for watershed restoration, I would say. But the discussion went like, there are mitigation programs, there's detection and suppression, and then there's restoration on the back end, and finding the right balance is difficult. I actually was the sponsor of a bill to buy a Firehawk helicopter. I spent about $27 million, and there's a lot of argument that maybe that money ought to have been spent on mitigation, but we're doing all 3, significant investment. We moved into the Forest Service program, probably the most interesting one because it's watershed, and their budget, they had gotten down about $1 million from the general fund. So we moved in the figure setting process. We moved $7 million over there, and then there's another bill that let's see, it's the one that we have to run with the long bill just to allow them to actually allocate that money in larger blocks. And now there's a stimulus bill coming along, which is going to move significant money, including a major assessment statewide of the needs for forest health and mitigation. So there's going to be a lot of activity in the whole arena of mitigation and forest health. And I think that's very healthy for the water, for our water system overall.
Senator, I think the bill you're referencing there was Senate Bill 240, which transferred 15 million from the general fund to the CWCB construction fund to specifically protect watersheds against the impacts of wildfires through, I believe, the existing watershed restoration grant program. But we certainly can see a huge need for those dollars over here in your district and throughout the entire Colorado River District. So we appreciate your leadership on that. Gayle?
Great. There's one other specific bill I think we should mention. Senator Rankin's been very involved on, though it is carried by Speaker Garnett and Representative Catlin, who also is in the River Districts area, Senator Donovan, who you just heard from, and Senator Simpson. But it is 1260. It is some of the state stimulus dollars we've been speaking of. Everyone knows federal stimulus dollars coming in, as Senator Rankin mentioned, there are billions coming in, but the state also has a package they're bringing in, and that would give currently slated to give $20 million to the state water plan. Senator Rankin, I know you were involved in some of those discussions on where some of that state stimulus money should go, and I just wanted to highlight that a little bit so people would know a little more.
Okay, yeah, and it actually is 20 million, but 5 million is what I was mentioning earlier. It goes specifically to the Water Supply Reserve Fund. So that, along with the 3 million that we restored to the Water Supply Reserve Fund, should give us adequate funding for the roundtables next year. The one thing to keep in mind with 1260 and other bills like it is the stimulus bills is they are one-time funding. So I like to think in terms of what happens next, what's our long-term plan. So I would encourage all of us to be thinking about that because we are very conscious of the fact that as we spend this stimulus money, we should not be committing, we should have sustainable programs. By the way, the $4 billion, and we should come back to that because that's still pretty flexible spending, is we can spend it through the end of 2024. So we do have a little bit of breathing room if, in fact, we can allocate some of that $4 billion to our water, to ongoing water projects, at least for the next 3 years. After that, we still need to be thinking about long-term funding of water.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a long game we're playing when it comes to our water resources and our water security on the Western Slope. I don't want to keep Amy Moyer, our next presenter, waiting too long, but I do have a couple of follow-up questions for you, Senator, related to those federal stimulus dollars. I think we all recognize there's a lot of still a number of questions that need to be answered about how those dollars will be spent, what the role of the legislature will be in directing those dollars, and whether we'll have time to get those dollars spent during this session, or whether we're looking at potentially a special session. Do you have any insight for us on that front?
Well, I can tell you there's a lot of discussion. What we hope to do is to set up a cash fund into which those dollars will go. And then there are negotiations going on with the administration that at least some of those dollars, relatively small amount, will still be so-called custodial funds. But now this is a big difference from the way the previous CARES Act dollars were spent. Those were all custodial funds and all spent through executive orders. If we do this cash fund, that means that the legislature will appropriate those dollars. And so they will be bills. It will look like a lot like the stimulus, in my view. Now, what's the time frame? We would hope to get, and we have to move very fast. This is a very moving target. We would like to get at least the first round of that spending under commitment by the end of the session. We may end up having to, God forbid, the Joint Budget Committee, just by way of complaint, we have worked constantly for 2 years. We do not get the recesses, and we start in November, right after the campaign. So anyway, the Joint Budget Committee might have to continue to work to recommend bills and lay out budgets, and then bring the legislature back for a special session. We would like to avoid that because the money does not all come at once. We have 3 years to spend it, and it won't all be transferred to the state at the same time. That plan is still in development. But I would say that if we do want to spend this first portion of it by the end of the session, we're going to need a lot of input from the water community on, what are the projects that we need to get underway? What's the spending schedule? I'm not even sure if we have to spend the money or just encumber it by the end of December. So you have to answer that question. We have to look at shovel-ready projects. I think Windy Gap can certainly get done in that time frame, for example. So we will have to talk about which projects fit in under which envelopes, and I hope that we'll be able to tell you how this is all going to work within about a week or two.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank Gayle Berry for all of her work for the Western Slope and her expertise. Her work with the district is invaluable. And to Senator Rankin, my hometown senator here in Garfield County and much of the River District territory, we do appreciate your leadership and your continued attention to West Slope water priorities and helping to steer dollars towards those priorities. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Zane.
Zane.
Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Senator. Thanks, Zane.
Take care. All right, our last presenter this afternoon is one of our newest members of the River District team, Amy Moyer, came to us from the Department of Natural Resources and specifically came to run our partnership project funding program with those revenues that were approved by voters last November when they approved ballot measure 7A. Amy is our Director of Strategic Partnerships, and without taking too much more of her time and thunder, I'll pass it over to her, and thanks for being here, Amy.
All right, thanks, Zane. Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to join you today and excited to join the River District team and talk a little bit about our partnership project funding program and how we feel like we're well positioned to assist in the stimulus funding opportunities that might become available and that we've heard about a little bit today. We do only have a few minutes here at the end of our webinar to talk about this program. So I do want to make a plug for the February Water with Your Lunch webinar that devoted the entirety of the program to this funding program and answered a lot of the questions on details and provided a lot of examples for the various project categories for this funding program. So we'll make sure, I think we've just posted in the chat, that you have access to that webinar and have access to our partnership project funding program website. Let me see if I can advance the slides. Oh, perfect. Here we go. So as Zane alluded to, our funding program started at the ballot box from the passage of ballot measure 7A. We are incredibly grateful to the voters for passing this ballot initiative with such an overwhelming margin. And at its core, our funding program is intended to invest in high impact projects that align with the River District mission and strategic priorities to keep water on the West Slope and to secure the future for West Slope water. We want to invest in projects that increase our communities and economies on the West Slope, increase our resiliency to increasing temperatures and declining flows. And at our core, we want to have our strategic focus be allowing our West Slope communities to adapt and thrive. And ideally, we want to be supporting collaborative projects with strong local support. We do require a letter of support from our local county commissioners and local elected officials. We want to work in conjunction with them on this funding program. But moving into just some of the details on our funding program, we have our funding program is operational. Our website is live. We are accepting applications. I know we've gotten a few questions ahead of our webinar on eligible entities. Eligible entities include projects across our 15 county region with the River District, and project proponents can include individuals, local governments, corporations, private entities like mutual ditch companies, nonprofits, and other partnerships. And as you can see, we have 5 categories for funding: productive agriculture, conservation and efficiency, healthy rivers, watershed health and water quality, and infrastructure. Oops, sorry about that. My slide advancement is jumping ahead. And I want to make another plug for the February webinar. We did go into detail regarding these categories and some example projects, but I do want to reiterate our focus here is on multi-benefit, multi-purpose projects. We want to see projects hit 2 or more of these categories, and that is the intention. But I want to spend just a few minutes highlighting some of our program pieces that make the River District and our program supportive of these stimulus dollars that you've heard about today. So again, we have a rolling application process. This allows us not to have set deadlines for project applications. We accept them at any time. This will allow us to align with any other funding opportunities and allow us to work with the timelines of the various projects. Let's see. We want our district funds to be a catalyst to bring in other funds. Our team, as Zane alluded to earlier, we're available to work with projects. We're available to help you navigate these various stimulus projects, stimulus opportunities. We can help shape your project to ensure that it meets multiple benefits. We just encourage you, contact us early. Let us help you work through your project. We are encouraging pre-application meetings for all of our various funding opportunities. We want to multiply our taxpayer funding with state, federal, and private dollars. We don't have a set match requirement, but we do expect that the River District will never be the sole source of funding. We do expect that project proponents bring cash to the table. As an example, we've just recently funded 5 additional projects that leverage over $1.2 million. We've used about $200,000 of our funding for those programs. And finally, our program is meant to be adaptable. We're meant to encourages flexibility in support of allowing our Western Slope communities to access as many of these stimulus dollars as we can. We can help support your projects to make sure that they are positioned as shovel ready and can help you navigate these dollars that may come to fruition. And with that, I do want to highlight our project email, partnerfunding@crwcd.org. Please reach out to us. You can reach out to me or anyone on our team. Use this email. We are interested in talking with you about your projects. We're interested in being a partner with you. We're interested in these innovative opportunities. As Senator Donovan and Senator Rankin alluded to, a lot of these stimulus dollars will have time clocks. And so we're interested in helping our Western Slope communities navigate these opportunities. So with that, Zane, I think I'll turn it back over to you and we can answer some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Appreciate the quick overview of this program that of course is a lot more detailed than we had time to provide today, but you can find more information on our website, coloradoriverddistrict.org, or email us at partnerfunding@crwcd.org. With that, I think I was planning to talk to you, Amy, mostly about how we do ensure that our partnership dollars coming from 7A are used as a catalyst, not only for stimulus dollars, but other federal and state programs that currently exist and currently have funding available, whether that be RCPP and some of the Farm Bill programs at the federal level, or some of the CWCB programs and other state programs that exist. Are you in a position to comment maybe about some of those more usual suspects that don't involve the stimulus dollars, where some of our project proponents might be looking to the state or federal governments for additional dollars?
Yeah, absolutely, Zane. And I'll just reiterate, it's unique that our grant program does not have a set matching requirement. The intention behind that is to work with projects, work with communities on their unique ability to provide match. Again, we do expect folks to come to the table with potentially other sources of funding, and those can be, of course, we want to see projects bring their own cash to the table, but we can help projects access other state opportunities, whether it's leveraging the Basin Roundtable funding that we've talked a lot about today, or the Water Plan Grant Program from the state side, or leveraging some NRCS EQIP funds or RCPP funds on the federal side. We can certainly help you navigate some of those opportunities. Again, with our rolling application basis, it helps us better align with those opportunities and better align with being a catalyst to access some of these additional funding opportunities.
Thanks, Amy. And the last question I have is more pointed towards the the multi-benefit nature of this program and the desire to see West Slope dollars being spent on the West Slope to accomplish priorities that benefit more than one bucket. So can you speak briefly at all to the importance of project ideas, being creative in ways that maybe a project could benefit agriculture and healthy rivers, or agriculture and recreation at the same time?
Absolutely, Zane. And again, we're really focused on this multi-purpose, multi-benefit nature of our funding sources. And I might just highlight an example of a project that we've recently funded, and you'll be able to see some of our funded applications via our website and our project map that's updated right now. But as an example project in the Upper Gunnison, from the Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District, we are funding a project that will combine two diversion structures into one to increase the efficiency and provide some efficiencies with shared infrastructure, but it also restores a portion of the Gunnison River. And so we're seeing some opportunities where water users can come together for the benefit of their agricultural production, but also restore the river at the same time. And so we have folks on our technical team that are able to work with projects, help identify where those multiple benefits can exist, and work with you early on to find those win-win opportunities and those example projects that we really want to highlight. Great,
thank you, Amy. We do have one last question. It's a broader question in the Q&A function here that talks about, what's the long-term approach in terms of preparing for climate change, specifically the possibility of more frequent and severe droughts. I guess I'll take a first step, but then maybe dish it to you, Amy, for some additional thoughts. As we talked about with Representative Roberts and Senator Donovan, there are a lot of these state stimulus dollars going towards the Department of Agriculture's drought resiliency programs. And I think for the first time, we're seeing a pretty major investment in drought response and drought resiliency programs at the state level. So I would point to that in response to Elise's question, but would ask Amy, for the good of the order, whether you have additional thoughts on that.
Sure, I would just say, again, at the core of our program and at the core of our mission is to help communities that adapt and thrive in the face of a changing climate. And so this new funding program that we have available, I think a large portion of those dollars will really go to make our communities more resilient, really make our dollars go farther, stretch farther, and assist with these other funding programs that are also recognizing the changing climate and the realities that we're going to face into the future.
I think that's a great point. So with that, we're just a couple of minutes before the end of our program. We do appreciate your being here with us, Amy, the overview you provided, and appreciate everybody else's attendance and being here with us today. Keep an eye out for future Water with Your Lunch programs. We look forward to having you back soon. And thanks again. You'll get a recording of this webinar in your inbox after we're done here. Feel free to share it with your friends or colleagues that you think might be interested in some of the topics we covered today. So with that, thank you all again, and appreciate your being here. Bye-bye.